Hey guys, good to see you here. Today we'll be covering installing Flutter on your local machine, as well as both Android Studio and Visual Studio Code as your IDEs. Let's get started. A good starting point is the official Flutter website, flutter.dev. You'll see a Get Started button at the top right. Just go ahead and click that. Now choose your operating system here. In my case, it's a Mac. And then your type of app. They have documentation for setting up iOS development, Android development, web, as well as desktop development. And in this video, we'll be covering both iOS and Android because those are the most common use cases for Flutter development. So let's get going with iOS first. What I would recommend is just scrolling down a little bit until you see install the Flutter SDK here. Here you can download a zip file of the Flutter SDK. Make sure to choose the right architecture. So in my case, I have Apple Silicon. So I'll just go ahead and download that one. And in the meantime, on Mac, Apple Silicon, we need to install some Rosetta stuff because Flutter makes use of some Rosetta 2 stuff. So we need to install that. So just, copy that command and drop it in your terminal. Open it up as well. It is. Drop that in. Your password. And that will install all the necessary Rosetta 2 stuff. Cool. So while the Flutter SDK is almost finished, what I would like to do normally is in my user folder, I create a development folder to just put all my development stuff in. I like to keep my machine a bit organized as much as I can. So it's not mandatory, but I would recommend doing the same. Let's have a look at my development folder then. Here it is. So as you can see, this is my development folder and the Flutter SDK is already in there. I'll just double click it to unpack. And that will put the unpacked Flutter SDK in my development folder. Cool. Now, next up is adding the Flutter SDK to your path. And what that essentially does is what you would like to do in your terminal or in the terminal of your IDE, for example, you would like to execute some Flutter commands. And in this case, if I type Flutter in my terminal, it won't do anything. So adding it to your path is a way to make the terminal known that, when I want to run a Flutter command, you can find it, here or there. So also in the documentation of Flutter itself, if I'm not mistaken, add Flutter to your path. Exactly, yeah. So you can do this in a couple of ways. It also depends on your shell. I'm running Z shell on my Mac. If you run any other shell, Bash or something else, Flutter has a link right here to some other variants. But I will just cover the Z shell for now. So if we go in the terminal again, then I will open up my .zsh rc file. Oops, where does that go? Sorry. As you can see, I already have a path defined here. And what I will do now is also make sure that Flutter SDK can be found. So I'll just copy this line and then put it in my path here. To save it. Then source it. What you can also do is to just restart the terminal. but this is a, well, faster way of sort of refreshing your paths, I would say. Cool. So now if I run Flutter, it should do something. Indeed. Nice. So we installed Flutter on our local machine now, and the terminal knows where it is. So next up is to start configuration for development on iOS. Let's just head over to the documentation again and see what they're telling us. Yeah, so first step is to install Xcode. So just go to the App Store, look for Xcode. Yeah, I already searched for it, but just to be sure, if you look for Xcode, you can find it here. I already have it installed, but yeah, if not, make sure to install it. It also includes Git and some other development stuff for your Mac. Could take some time to install, so yeah, just be aware of that, I would say. Once you have installed Xcode, we need to execute this line in our terminal. What this line does is it tells the Xcode command line well, the location of our Xcode. This could be handy if, for example, later on you might need multiple versions of Xcode and you need to switch between them. This would be the way to do it. And also, we're doing a first launch, which basically just initializes some stuff for us. So we'll just execute that. Password. And that's done. Oh, I almost skipped a line there. So what we also need to do is accept some licensing stuff. So just copy that line, put it in terminal, read through it if you want, and type agree or cancel if you don't agree, but yeah. All right. Now that that's out of the way, let's have a look at configuring an iOS simulator. So we can use this line in our terminal to download the iOS simulator. Now for me, this, well, was very fast, but that's because I already have simulators in place. I'm assuming it might take a bit longer for you, but yeah, don't worry. So as soon as you have installed these simulators, we can use this line to start up. And if everything is all right, see a simulator on its way. And there it is. Cool. So we have a simulator in place, which is very nice for some development on your machine without a physical device. And I guess that was it for iOS configuration. There's a lot of stuff still in the documentation regarding physical devices, but that's a bit more complex. I won't cover it for now, but the documentation is quite clear. So if you do want to develop on your physical iPhone or iPad, just go through the steps and I'm sure you'll get there. Just to make sure that we didn't forget anything. Ah, yeah, that's a good one. So what iOS also needs is CocoaPods, which is used for dependencies in the iOS world. So what I would recommend is not using these steps, but actually making use of Homebrew. For those of you that don't know what Homebrew is, it's a, well, sort of package manager for Mac OS, and I guess also Linux. Put it here. And it makes your life on Mac way easier, in my opinion. It's a must for developers on Mac. What you can do here, I'm on brew.sh, is copy this command, drop it in your terminal, and that will install Homebrew. Then what you should also do is, you might have already noticed it before, but you also have to add it to your path, which is what we also did for Flutter. So if I go back to my terminal and then have a look at the shell file again, yeah, you can see, and not only do I have the Flutter path configured, but also the Homebrew one. And what that does is it allows me to execute brew, basically. So in this case, you could do brew install CocoaPods, and that will install CocoaPods via Homebrew. Cool. So yeah, CocoaPods is also installed now, which means that everything regarding iOS should be a-okay. Now in the documentation, we'll just go back and we'll move on to Android. See some Rosetta stuff here again, but we already did that. Okay, installation, already did that, adding it to the path. Configure Android development. Yeah, so step one is to install Android Studio, which is, well, one of the IDEs that we will cover and is used quite a lot in Flutter development. So if we go to developer.android.com/studio, we'll end up on this page here for Android Studio, and we can click the download button right here to start downloading. A lot of terms and conditions. Check the box that you've read it, and then click the correct download button. I already downloaded it, so I will not wait for it to finish, but so once you've downloaded Android Studio and installed it as well, it's time to fire it up. I'll just make sure to also grab the Flutter documentation again. Start up Android Studio. And first thing we'll do is move to settings straight away. And here, what we can look for here in the search bar is the SDK tools. Then here on the left side, you'll see languages and frameworks, and then Android SDK below that. Just click on that, and here you'll find a tab for, well, SDK platform, but also SDK tools. Click that. Also make sure to check the hide obsolete packages box, because you might miss some packages that you do need to install. And then just, well, cover the list that you see here in the Flutter documentation. So Android SDK platform, API 35, SDK command line tools, SDK build tools, platform tools, emulator. I already had an installation of Android Studio, so yeah, there might be some things installed already that were not there for you. But don't worry, just make sure to install all the necessary components. And then once you've done that, we can have a look. Yeah, the licensing stuff. So this is actually the same as what we did for iOS, just a bit of a different command. So just copy that command and put it in the terminal to, well, accept Android licensing. Longer than expected. But all SDK package licenses were accepted. Good. All right. So that should be it. So Now, if we grab the terminal just one more time, we can execute a command called flutter doctor, and that will give us sort of the statuses of all the components that we need or things that we still have to do to configure for development. A lot of green check marks. Good. As you can see, it checks, well, the Flutter installation, Android, iOS, even Chrome, and the IDEs that you have either installed or not. Cool. Green, green, green. So now in Android Studio, what we would like to do is also configure it for Flutter development. And for that to work, we need to go to settings once more. On the left side, we click plugins, and there we'll have a look for, well, you can already see it, but just if you don't see it, type Flutter in the search bar and you'll see Flutter right there. Make sure to install it, and that will automatically also install all the Dart programming languages stuff. So you can just, well, install the Flutter plugin, and that should be good enough to start a Flutter project for you. So now, if you restart Android Studio, you should see, well, the button to create a new Flutter project. So let's just click that. Make sure to really select Flutter on the left side, because, well, I had it one time where I clicked new Flutter project and it would, well, default to Java, which was weird for me, but right. So let's just double check that we selected Flutter. Then here we can select the Flutter SDK. So in this case, the development version. Let's call it my project. Here they have underscores. That's a Dart programming language convention. And then here you can select all the platforms that you would like to support. You can also, well, uncheck some of them and, well, add support later. But yeah, for the sake of it, let's just leave everything on for now. Let's create the first Flutter project. Here, fair enough. Cool. So here we have the demo project of Flutter. You can also see here at the top the simulator that we had opened previously when we configured iOS is now visible here. So it should work if we click the play button. Drop the simulator here. Have a look at it. It will launch. I think this is always a good test to make sure that, well, you covered all the installation and configuration stuff from A to Z. If we have a build on either a simulator, an emulator, or a device, then we should be good. To make sure that you test on both iOS and Android. For the sake of time, I will just check iOS for now, but it's always good practice to test both. Nice. Congratulations on your first Flutter project, I guess. Cool. All right, we'll move the simulator out of the way for now. Go to yeah. I'll also close off Android Studio. Because what I would also like to focus on now is another IDE which is very popular in the Flutter development community, and that's Visual Studio Code. Personally, I don't really use it. I use Android Studio. I've been an Android developer before my Flutter journey, so I was already familiar with Android Studio, and yeah, I just really like the JetBrains IDEs. But Visual Studio Code is a bit more configurable and lightweight, I'd say. So it all comes down to personal preference. Not that this one is well better than the other or the other way around. Anyway, if we go to code.visualstudio.com, we'll end up on this screen, and you'll already see a download button here. You just click that. It'll start downloading. Not that large, so that's good. We'll install it. And we should be able to. Cool. So that's Visual Studio Code. For Flutter and Dart to work, you can click here on Extensions on the left-hand side, and then have a look here for Flutter. You see that it's verified, a lot of downloads. Just make sure to install this extension, and that will make sure that Visual Studio Code is ready for Flutter development. So now if we open up that my first project that we created using Android Studio with Visual Studio Code, we can check if Flutter is also working there. So let's just have a look at the lib folder, open up main Dart. All looks good. If I'm not mistaken, you can run and debug here. Yep. It's already launching on the simulator again. Check if I can find it right here. There it is. Cool. That's it. You just installed Flutter on your local machine, and you're able to develop for Android and iOS using your favorite IDE. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you in the next one. Cheers.